The first time Pep Guardiola and José Mourinho shared a football pitch, it wasn't as rivals. It was in 1997 at FC Barcelona. Pep, the elegant midfield general. Mourinho, the translator-turned-assistant coach working under Bobby Robson. At the time, no one could have predicted the war that would come years later. But if you looked close enough, even then, there were cracks, subtle glances, strategic silences, competing energies orbiting the same sun. Pep was already a footballing philosopher. Even as a player, his movements read like theory. He cared deeply about systems, balance, and the poetry of control. Mourinho was different. He didn't want control, he wanted power, and he would take it however it came. That difference would define the next 2 decades of elite football. Years passed. Pep retired. Mourinho rose. By 2004, José had dragged Porto, yes, Porto, to a Champions League title. A tactical masterclass built on ruthlessness, preparation, and the belief that beautiful football was optional. Winning wasn't. Pep? He was coaching Barcelona B, surrounded by kids, theories, and notebooks. While Mourinho lifted trophies, Pep was still drawing arrows on whiteboards. The world saw a gap. Mourinho saw a timeline. In 2008, Barcelona made a gamble. Pep, zero experience at top level, was handed the biggest job in world football. The academy graduate, the purist, the idealist. The board believed they needed soul. Mourinho believed he had been betrayed. He had interviewed for the job. He had prepared a presentation. He had a plan. But Barca chose heart over hardware. What followed wasn't just a rivalry. It was a referendum. Barcelona versus Real Madrid was already the most watched derby in world football. But with Pep and José at the helm, it became something else. A cold war of ideologies, total football versus tactical pragmatism, silence versus spectacle. It was theater. It was chess. It was war. And the first real blow landed not on a pitch, but in a press room. Mourinho, newly crowned as Madrid boss, was asked how he felt about Pep. He smirked. Some coaches play to win. Others play to be loved. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't kind. It was a shot fired directly into the soul of Guardiola's philosophy. Pep didn't respond. Not immediately. He waited. Not because he was weak, but because he understood something José didn't. Silence can be louder than applause, but that silence had a limit. And when it broke, so did football history. What was coming wasn't just about tactics or trophies. It was about identity, about control, about legacy, and neither man was willing to lose, not on the pitch, not in the tunnel, not even in the mind of the public. This wasn't just football anymore. This was the beginning of something bigger, something deeper, something neither of them would ever truly escape. And it all started in a room full of microphones. What made it so compelling wasn't just the contrast in styles, it was the contrast in souls. Pep, the disciple of Johan Cruyff, believed in harmony, positional play, one-touch dominance. His teams didn't just win, they hypnotized. Mourinho believed in disruption, in making chaos feel like a plan, in leaving a stadium with blood on the tactics board. They weren't opposites. They were inverses. Both were obsessive. Both were brilliant. Both shaped by pain. Pep never forgot how it felt to be underestimated, called too soft, too idealistic. Mourinho never forgot how it felt to be overlooked, called just a translator, a mimic. By 2010, football had split. Fans, pundits, even players took sides. Were you with the romantic or the realist, the artist or the assassin? But before the split became irreversible, before the headlines and the 5-0 and the eye pokes, there was still a moment, brief, fragile, where it felt like these two men might coexist. Not as friends, but as forces. Mutual gravity pulling football into a new era. That moment wouldn't last, and when it finally cracked, It would shake not just La Liga, but the entire landscape of world football, because what Pep and Jose built wasn't just a rivalry, it was a mirror, and what the game saw staring back would change everything. By the time 2010 arrived, the tension had metastasized. José Mourinho had just orchestrated one of the most ruthless tactical executions football had ever seen, Inter Milan's two-legged Champions League upset over Guardiola's Barcelona. It wasn't just a victory. It was a rejection. Barcelona had dominated Europe the year prior. They were the team that passed you to death. That turned the ball into a leash. That made possession a prison. Pep didn't just win, he controlled. But Jose, he didn't play along. He set up Inter as a barricade, not a team. 2 banks of 4, relentless pressing in 1/3, brutal defense in the other 2. At Camp Nou, down a man, they held. For 90 minutes, 85 minutes without a shot. But it didn't matter. The 3-1 advantage from the first leg was enough. When the whistle blew, Mourinho didn't celebrate quietly. He sprinted across the pitch, fist pumping, eyes wild, past Barcelona's bench, past their players, right in front of their fans. Security had to hold people back. It wasn't just about winning, it was about desecrating the temple. Pep stood frozen, not because he was surprised, but because he understood exactly what had just happened. This was war, and it was personal now. That summer, Real Madrid signed Mourinho. The collision was inevitable. Spain braced. The Clásico, already the most charged rivalry in football, was now a political, philosophical, and emotional powder keg. Franco-era scars, Catalan independence, Messi, Ronaldo. Now add Pep and Jose, the ultimate minds, steering those forces. In their first league Clásico, Barcelona obliterated Madrid, 5-0. It was poetry with knives. Iniesta floated, Xavi dictated, Messi ghosted. Between lines. Mourinho didn't move on the touchline. He just stared. After the match, he muttered, "We lost against a better team." But he didn't forget, and he never forgave. Because while the scoreboard showed 5-0, Mourinho knew what it meant symbolically. Pep had reasserted the soul of football, that the game could still be beautiful, that ideology could still win, so Jose changed. In the Copa del Rey, final months later, Madrid met Barca again, and this time Jose had reshaped his squad into something meaner. They fouled early, broke rhythm, set traps, forced Pep's men to play faster than they wanted. It worked. Madrid won. 1-0. Extra time. Ronaldo header. But even in victory, the match was ugly. So was the aftermath. The next meetings weren't football matches. They were wars of attrition. Tactics collided. So did boots. Players were sent off. Staff members clashed. One match ended, with Pep and Mourinho not even shaking hands. Pep, usually so composed, once addressed the media and said, "In this room, he is the boss. He can have his own Champions League off the pitch." It was venom, delivered in silk. This was no longer about football, it was about who would define it. And both men, in their own way, were ready to burn down the game just to win that argument. Each encounter became more than just a match. It was a referendum on philosophy. Fans weren't just cheering for teams anymore, they were defending world views. One believed that domination could be gentle, fluid, beautiful. The other believed that domination came through disruption, grit, and suffering. And in the midst of it all, players became pawns. Sergio Busquets, caught faking contact. Pepe, stamping on Messi's hand. Marcelo, red-carded for retaliation. Even the usually untouchable Messi got dragged into the mud, shouting, pushing, glaring. The lines between genius and madness blurred. In one unforgettable moment, Mourinho poked Tito Villanova, the Barca assistant, in the eye during a sideline scuffle. Cameras caught it. The football world gasped, but Mourinho never apologized. He called it football theater. Pep, for his part, began to unravel. The man who once seemed serene now looked weathered, hunted. In one press conference, his voice cracked when asked about the relentless tension. "Maybe I'm not made for this." The pressure wasn't just tactical, it was spiritual. Every game felt like an existential test. Every loss, a betrayal of an entire ideology. And then, one day, Pep walked away. In 2012, he announced he was leaving Barcelona, not for a better job, not for money, but for air. He needed to breathe. The rivalry had devoured him, and Mourinho, he stayed, triumphant, vindicated. But even as he held trophies, there was a hollowness, because the war needed two generals, and without Pep, the battle felt less meaningful. But it wasn't over. It never really would be. When Pep Guardiola left Barcelona in 2012, it wasn't a resignation. It was an exhale. 4 years of brilliance had drained him, not just physically, spiritually. The Guardiola who had once spoken in metaphors and smiled through strategy now sat in front of microphones like a man dodging invisible punches. He took a sabbatical, flew to New York, rented an apartment in Manhattan, spent days walking, reading, disappearing into crowds. He said it was for rest, but everyone knew it was an escape. Meanwhile, Mourinho stayed. Real Madrid, under his command, had finally broken Barcelona's grip. They won the league with 100 points. Ronaldo, driven by José's relentless psychology, outscored Messi. It was domination, on paper. But behind the scenes, the empire cracked. Mourinho's methods were brutal and brutalizing. Training sessions turned confrontational. He benched Iker Casillas, a Spanish icon, and accused his own players of betrayal. The media turned. The fans turned. Eventually, the locker room did too. By 2013, Mourinho was gone. Not fired, just expelled. Like the body rejecting an organ it never quite accepted. He returned to Chelsea, the one place he still called home. And Pep? He emerged from silence with a quiet announcement. He would take over Bayern Munich. Germany didn't know what was coming. Pep arrived like a scientist in a steel lab. Bayern had just won the treble under Jupp Heynckes, but Pep wanted to rewire everything. Training, regiments, passing angles, how defenders breathed under pressure. It wasn't change for change's sake. It was a blueprint. But the ghosts of Spain followed him. Mourinho's Chelsea met Pep's Bayern in the 2013 UEFA Super Cup, another battlefield. It went to penalties. Pep's team won, but the handshake at full time was ice. There were no words. Because there didn't need to be. The rivalry had evolved. It was no longer confined to Spain. It had metastasized across Europe, into Bundesliga, into the Premier League, into interviews, press conferences, player relationships. Mourinho in London took jabs in media briefings. Some managers get to choose the best clubs with unlimited resources. Others build. Pep never replied directly, but his methods spoke volumes. At Bayern, he bent German football to his will. Domestically, he was untouchable. But in Europe, something lingered. Each Champions League exit felt heavier. The further he got from Barcelona, the more the pressure returned. But this time, without Messi. Back in England, Mourinho won the league again with Chelsea. But like clockwork, the third season curse returned. Fallouts, fines, firings. It was as if Mourinho's success always came with an expiration date. But Pep? He was just getting started. In 2016, he moved to Manchester City, and when Mourinho took over Manchester United that same year, the football gods smiled. Because somehow, after all the years, all the clubs, all the titles, they were in the same city. And the war wasn't over. It had just become local. Manchester became the new ground zero, blue versus red, method versus mentality, precision versus provocation. And this time the whole world was watching, not just for the football, but for the fallout. The Premier League wasn't ready for what came next. Billboards, headlines, tactical debates on morning TV. Even fans who didn't support City or United picked sides. Their first derby was like a cinematic reboot. Pep's City dominated the ball, weaving patterns like silk. Mourinho's United waited, countered, tackled with fists instead of finesse. City won 2-1. But the score was secondary. What mattered was the narrative. Guardiola had brought his philosophy to England, and it worked. But Mourinho, he wasn't done. In the return leg, United stunned City, 3-2, away. Mourinho celebrated in front of the away fans like a man resurrected. Water bottles were kicked, scarves were thrown. The press couldn't get enough, but something was different this time. Mourinho looked tired. The fire was still there. The quotes, the stare. But the game was moving. And Pep? He was leading the charge. Manchester City became a machine. Pep engineered centurions, 100 points, records shattered, positionless play. Guardiola had found the tools he never had at Bayern. Young, hungry players who believed, no, trusted, in every detail he demanded. And José? He was slipping. His methods clashed with modern dressing rooms. His confrontations felt less strategic, more self-inflicted. He still won matches, still held press rooms hostage with sound bites, but the magic, the edge, was fading. Still, no matter the outcome, the tension never left, because even as they aged, even as their legacies solidified, each man still saw the other not as a rival, but as a reflection. What if I had done it his way? What if he had lived mine? In football, greatness is usually lonely, but in this case, it was defined by proximity. Because without Mourinho, Pep is just a philosopher, and without Pep, Mourinho is just a fighter. Together, they weren't just coaches. They were a paradox, one the game still hasn't solved. As the 2020s arrived, something shifted. The rivalry that once electrified Europe now echoed through memory more than match day. Pep Guardiola, now deep into his reign at Manchester City, had become a kind of monarch, no longer the insurgent philosopher, now the architect of a dynasty. His teams didn't just win, they educated. Triangle passes, inverted fullbacks, positional rotations. Guardiola turned City into a classroom that punished anyone who failed to do their homework. And he wasn't just winning domestic titles. He was reshaping how the English game was played. Meanwhile, Mourinho faded. His return to the Premier League, first with Spurs, then with Roma in Serie A, felt like chapters from a book that no longer turned new pages. The tactics were familiar. The press conference drama remained. But the spark, that combustible energy that once lit up entire stadiums, flickered. He still had moments, a victory over City here, a dramatic quote there, a trophy with Roma that sparked celebrations across Italy. But they felt like echoes of a storm that had already passed. In contrast, Guardiola's City marched forward, year after year, breaking records, silencing doubters, signing players built for control, not chaos. And yet, no matter how many titles Pep won, no matter how many games Mourinho lost, they remained linked, forever. Every analyst compared them. Every debate circled back. Every new coach was measured by how much of Pep or José lived in them. Arteta, the Pep disciple. Conte, a Mourinho echo. Their rivalry had become immortal not because it continued, but because it refused to die, and football, for all its obsession with the next, kept returning to them. But underneath the legacy, underneath the trophies, and tactics and timelines, something human lingered. Regret Mourinho, in a rare 2022 interview, reflected on his time at Madrid. I didn't enjoy it. I was too focused on fighting, on proving people wrong. Guardiola, weeks later, speaking about his sabbatical, said quietly, "I was broken. I didn't know how to stop the noise. These weren't just men with careers, they were men with scars. Because when you spend your life defining a sport, you also let that sport define you." And for all their differences, Pep and Jose had walked a mirrored path. Both started as outsiders. Both rose through brilliance. Both believed, truly believed, that football could be art. They just disagreed on the brush strokes. And the world, it had judged them both, crowned one, criticized the other. But the truth lived somewhere in between. Because if you watched a Mourinho team in their prime, Inter 2010, Chelsea 2005, you saw power shaped by precision. And if you watched a Guardiola team, Barcelona 2009, City 2022, you saw structure shaped by soul. Both made the game bend, and both paid the price for doing so, because history doesn't remember only the winners. It remembers the ones who made people feel something. And Mourinho and Guardiola made everyone feel everything. Rage, awe, confusion, inspiration. They weren't just tacticians, they were provocateurs of feeling. Fans argued not just about lineups or formations, but about meaning. What kind of football do you believe in? What do you think sport should be? Efficient or expressive? Ruthless or romantic? And slowly, their rivalry transcended the pitch. Books were written, documentaries streamed, college lectures analyzed their duels. Guardiola's touchline crouch became iconic. Mourinho's stare, a meme and a memory, even when they didn't meet. They met, a new Champions League draw. Someone always asked, what if Pep meets Jose again? Even the players felt it. Kevin De Bruyne, who once clashed with Mourinho, flourished under Pep. Mohamed Salah, frozen out at Chelsea, reborn after leaving Jose. The echoes were everywhere, across clubs, across eras, but what no one admitted out loud was that they missed each other because iron sharpens iron, and legacy needs a rival to be written in bold. And now, as the football world tilts toward youth, toward fresh faces and next-gen tacticians, something strange is happening. The myth of Mourinho is growing again. The critique softens. The nostalgia blooms. Younger fans, who only saw the end, now discover the beginning. The fire. The mind games. The chaos that conquered empires. And Pep? He keeps evolving, changing football, still. But now with a quieter intensity, less desperate to prove, more determined to finish his chapter in control. They'll always be compared, always linked, but maybe, just maybe, time has made something possible that was once unthinkable. Perspective. And in that, perhaps there's peace. Because no matter who you cheered for, no matter which side you picked, one thing is certain. You were lucky to watch them collide, to witness not just greatness, but its cost, and to realize, long after the trophies fade, that the true legacy of Pep and Jose is that they made the game matter more to everyone. In the twilight of two careers that redefined an era, the final chapter isn't written with a whistle or a trophy, but in silence. Pep Guardiola and Jose Mourinho no longer meet on the sidelines the way they once did. Their teams might still clash. The names on the back of the jerseys may echo the past, but the true battlefield now lives elsewhere, in memory, in imitation, in legacy. You can see their fingerprints across Europe, in locker rooms, on chalkboards, in the quiet, pre-match rituals of coaches who were once players in their systems. Every time a modern manager chooses control over chaos, every time a team counters with ruthless simplicity, they're quoting Pep and Jose, even if they don't know it. Because football didn't just watch these two men, it absorbed them. They changed the shape of the game, but also the soul of it. And as new rivalries rise, Klopp versus Arteta, Xavi versus Ancelotti, none quite carry the same gravitational pull. Because Mourinho versus Guardiola was never just about football. It was about identity. They forced fans to choose a side, not a club, and in doing so, they elevated debate into devotion. They had opposite philosophies, opposite personalities. One studied under Cruyff, the other under hardship. One whispered, control. The other shouted defiance. But both demanded the same thing from the world. Witness me, and we did. We watched them shake empires, break records, lose with dignity, win with fury. But maybe the most important thing they gave us was each other. Because without the resistance, without the mirror, without the critic, neither would have reached so far. And that's the paradox. They were rivals. Yes, but more than that. They were co-authors of the same story. In interviews now, they speak softer. Mourinho, once fire and fury, now pauses longer between words. His metaphors are less cutting. His smiles, real or rehearsed, come more often. He's still sharp, still dangerous. But there's a certain gentleness now, as if the war is over and all that's left is memory. Guardiola, too, has changed. The perfectionist still rages on the touchline, still adjusts socks on his players, still rewatches every mistake like it's a betrayal. But when he speaks of the past, it's not with rivalry. It's with reverence. He made me better, Pep once said. Without him, I don't know who I would have become. That admission, small, almost buried, meant more than a trophy ever could, because it confirmed what football had always suspected, that under the posturing, the mind games, the tactical battles, there was respect, twisted by ego, hidden by headlines, but real. And now, as football becomes more digital, more optimized, more content-driven, there's a longing for the rawness of what they gave us. When rivalries weren't curated, they combusted. When storylines weren't manufactured, they unfolded. When the men on the touchline weren't brands, they were characters in an ancient drama. Think of the images. Mourinho sprinting down the sideline at Camp Nou like a man. Possessed. Pep crouching on the edge of his technical area, eyes fixed, fingers twitching, both drenched in pressure, in purpose, in belief. Now think of the silence after. The years when they no longer faced each other, the ghost games, the missed moments. You could feel football itself missing something, some heat, some heartbeat, because they weren't just coaches, they were climate. And now they're legend. Their stories still ripple. A youth coach in Brazil copies Pep's positional play. A lower league gaffer in Portugal channels José's siege mentality. Their philosophies pass down like gospel, sometimes misunderstood, often diluted, but always echoing. And someday, decades from now, someone will ask, who were the greatest? And the answer won't be just about wins. It'll be about the weight of memory, about the men who turned match days into battlefields, who made journalists write poetry, who made fans choose between brains and fire, beauty and brutality, and who, above all, made us believe that football could be something more than sport, that it could be myth, that it could be story, that it could be Shakespeare, wearing boots,